This program has been brought to you thanks to the generous contributions of our patrons on Patreon. Your patronage is greatly appreciated. And for more content like this, be sure to check out the Modern Alchemist channel on Patreon. Greetings, and welcome to the Modern Alchemist channel. I'm Aubrey Forrest, the Modern Alchemist, and this is Alchemy Lab. Today on Alchemy Lab, we will be discussing the Kybalion, Chapter 2, Section 5, the Principle of Rhythm. As a component of our discussion, we'll talk about what rhythm is, what we know about it, and what the book has to say about it. We'll then look at what the costs and benefits are to rhythm, and we'll look at how we can polarize ourselves against rhythm's swing. So, you ready? I'm ready. Let's begin.
Shall we begin? Let's begin now.
Before beginning our discussion of the principle of rhythm and looking at what the Kybalion has to say about it, I think it might actually be very productive for us to just take a moment and recognize how much we already know about the principle of rhythm simply by virtue of living and breathing here on planet Earth. What do I mean by that? Well, from every moment, of every second, of every minute, of every day, we experience the principle of rhythm. We experience it when we breathe, and we have the inhalation and the exhalation. And of course, the 4 stages of meditation, which I discussed in a previous video, is an illustration of the principle of rhythm as a function of a meditation. So that when you go through the 4 stages of breathing and you recognize that there's emptiness, and then you inhale, and then there's fullness, and then there's the need to exhale, and then there's emptiness again. Those 4 stages, as you move through, embody the principle of rhythm in your very being. The very essence of your being requires that to take place. It is required. We see the principle of rhythm embodied in the day and night cycle. We see it in the seasonal cycle. We see it in the annual cycle. We see it in cycles that are even in greater scope. And each of these cycles, from opening to closing, from birth to death, are all representative of the principle of rhythm. We also see the principle of rhythm embodied within social structures, so that we know that every kingdom that rises must also fall. Every government that rises must also fall. That nothing lasts forever. And we're going to talk about that phrase, nothing lasts forever, because I think that we don't understand it quite the way we think we do. So these are the things that the principle of rhythm embody that we can look at and see in our lives. And when you recognize that rhythm is a function of electromagnetism, and in our essentials class when we discuss the Caduceus staff, we will see this at play when we start dealing with some of the science of rhythm. But in practical observation and just simply looking out into the universe with our 2 eyeballs, and making some, evaluations of what we're experiencing and what we're seeing, we can witness rhythm everywhere. And rhythm then can be described scientifically as frequency. So because that's what it is, right? It rises and it falls, it opens and it closes, and that is frequency in electromagnetic terms. So previously we talked about vibration, and now we're talking about frequency. So sure enough, Nikola Tesla, who said that the universe, if you look at it in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration, you've got this thing locked down. You know what the universe is about. And he clearly was an alchemist who clearly understood these principles and then employed them. Remember, this stuff is not just for some kind of metaphysical awareness. All of the stuff that we're talking about is actual science, that things are built upon an understanding of the electric universe that opens up more than just metaphysical gateways. It opens up understanding into everything. Sociology, politics, anthropology, biology, chemistry, all of it is present there, every bit of it. Astrophysics, in terms of what we can recognize and what we can see electromagnetically as a function of the universe at play, at rhythm, moving about itself, always in motion because everything is always vibrating. All right? So that's what we already know about the principle of rhythm, which I think is a great deal. Let's see what the Kybalion would like us to know about it. Five, the principle of rhythm. Everything flows in and out. Everything has its tides. All things rise and fall. The pendulum swing manifests in everything. The measure of the swing to the right is the measure of the swing to the left. Rhythm compensates. The Kybalion. This principle embodies the truth that in everything there is manifested a measured motion, to and fro, a flow and an inflow, a swing backward and forward, a pendulum-like movement, a tide-like ebb and flow, a high tide and a low tide, between the two poles which exist in accordance with the principle of polarity described a moment ago. There is always an action and a reaction, an advance and a retreat, a rising and a sinking. This is in the affairs of the universe, suns, worlds, men, animals, mind, energy, and matter. This law is manifest in the creation and destruction of worlds, in the rise and fall of nations, in the life of all things, and finally, in the mental states of man. And it is with this latter that the Hermeticists find the understanding of the principle most important. The Hermeticists have grasped this principle, finding its universal application, and have also discovered certain means to overcome its effects in themselves by the use of the appropriate formulas and methods. They apply the mental law of neutralization. They cannot annul the principle or cause it to cease its operation, but they have learned how to escape its effects upon themselves to a certain degree depending upon the mastery of the principle. They have learned how to use it instead of being used by it. In this and similar methods consists the art of the Hermeticists. The master of Hermetics polarizes himself at the point at which he desires to rest, and then neutralizes the rhythmic swing of the pendulum, which would tend to carry him to the other pole. All individuals who have attained any degree of self-mastery do this to a certain degree, more or less unconsciously. But the master does this consciously and by the use of his will, and attains a degree of poise and mental firmness almost impossible of belief on the part of the masses, who are swung backward and forward like a pendulum. This principle and that of polarity have been closely studied by the Hermeticists, and the methods of counteracting, neutralizing, and using them form an important part of the Hermetic mental alchemy. So what are the costs and what are the benefits of rhythm? Well, first off, we understand that everything ends. Now, for me personally, that's often something that I cling on to. Anyone who's dealt with any kind of chronic anything, whether it's migraines or back pain or arthritis, you recognize that the cycle of pain is exactly that. It's a cycle. Similarly, anyone who's ever dealt with depression understands, or anxiety. While it may feel in the middle of that like you are inside of a black room and it's cold and dark and hopeless, or inside of a room that's creating you massive angst, whatever you envision for that, you have to recognize that you weren't in there all the time to begin with, and you won't be in there all the time to conclude with. Like, everything ends. So anything that has a beginning will have a conclusion. Now, there's an interesting esoteric principle embedded in this, and that is that nothing lasts forever. I love this one so much. It's so well hidden in plain sight, it's amazing. What does this mean? Nothing lasts forever. Everybody assumes that when I say nothing lasts forever, that is equivocated to everything ends, okay? But it's not. It's not. It's completely different. The idea of everything ending is speaking to everything, meaning that anything which is created will conclude at some point. It will be subject to rhythm. There is one thing that is not created, one thing which is eternal, and one thing which lasts forever, and that is nothing. And where do we find this? We find the nothing inside of, this is what's called a hypertropoid, commonly known as an hourglass figure. This is the negative space that is contained within a torus, so that you would see the torus coming around like this, and it creates a donut, right? So here is the opening. This then looks like an eye. This is the whole idea of an eye, okay? It really is, because this is the point through which energy enters into the torus, and this point here is the negative space. This is also known as counter space. Well, at the very center of this, because this forms a cone, and I will talk about language. I'm going to introduce you to David Lapointe and his excellent work dealing with magnets and plasma. But what you see is that in the very center of this is a containment dome, there's nothing. And in any time that you look at a magnet through a ferrule cell, which is a cell that's translucent that allows you to actually see the magnetic field lines, in the very center of this spirograph pattern that you'll have is nothing. In fact, the counter space, and it is that way in everything. Anything that is created has nothing in its core, has nothing in the center. So tornadoes and cyclones and hurricanes and plasmoids, the sun, the earth, everything, it has at some point in its very center there's nothing. And so everything comes from nothing, because what is the nothing then? The nothing is the ether. The nothing is the ether, okay? And so it is the counter space that responds to the inclusion of light, which then is everything. And the combination of the two become the animus mundi for the universe, the universal soul, the expression. We've talked about this in other classes, but this is that unification of the static and the active, the immovable object against the irresistible force. So that is this idea. So nothing does in fact last forever. When someone says nothing lasts forever, you're like, I don't think you know what that means. That actually is true. Nothing does last forever, and nothing is everywhere. It's the esoteric. So anyway, and this is a hypertropoid, which is the counter space present within a torus, and everything is toroidal in the universe.